Who Killed Nelson Nutmeg? Written and read by Danny Stack.
Chapter 4. Someone's Killed Nelson Nutmeg. Nelson's retreat was very dark when it was this late. Billie could barely see as she crept along. All the caravans were quiet, as if no one was inside them. Occasionally she heard the faint sound of a TV or laughter, which reassured her that someone was in the caravans after all. Otherwise, it felt like she had stumbled across the caravan park of the living dead. She didn't want to think about zombies, though. She wanted to find out who was arguing by the cliffs. The wind swirled around her and the waves continued to crash onto the beach, which distorted the voices. She couldn't quite hear what they were saying, but she knew she was going in the right direction. She just had to get closer. Billie edged along the path towards the cliffs. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise. Her heart leapt in her chest with fright. She glanced to her left and saw that the noise came from a rusty garden windmill. Billie told herself she was too old to be scared by silly sounds coming from stupid windmills. She turned her attention back to getting closer to the cliffs. Moments later, she reached the beginning of the cliff path. It was extremely dark here, completely separate from the caravans. But now she could hear the raised voices above the wind. "I won't let you stand in my way anymore," came an anguished cry. "Forget it, this is the end of Nelson Nutmeg," said another voice. The end of Nelson Nutmeg? What did that mean? Billie decided she couldn't stop now. She had to find out who was arguing and why. Billie tiptoed up the cliff path, which was severely steep. Everyone knew not to go up there, especially at night. Eventually, she made it to the top of the path and crouched down by a rock to keep out of sight. She peered over the rock. Two figures were arguing by the cliff's edge. One of them was clearly Nelson Nutmeg. She could make out the outline of his distinctive costume. Billie couldn't see the other figure because Nelson Nutmeg was in the way. "I told you to back off," someone shouted. Billie ducked out of sight instinctively. When she looked over the rock again, she couldn't believe her eyes. Ah! Nelson Nutmeg was falling over the cliff, and now the mystery villain was coming Billie's way. She ducked again, and the mystery villain passed by without seeing her. She peered over the rock once more, desperate to find out what had happened to Nelson Nutmeg. Billie took careful steps towards the edge to see where Nelson had gone. She was a bit scared of heights, but she didn't allow herself to think about that now. She just had to see for herself. When she reached the edge, she saw Nelson Nutmeg lying far below on the beach. He wasn't moving, and his costume was crumpled up from the fall. Billie gasped with shock. "Someone's killed Nelson Nutmeg," she shouted at the top of her voice. But no one heard her. The darkness swallowed up her voice amongst the sound of the wind and the sea. Chapter 5. Alien Conspiracies. Billie ran as fast as she could down the cliff path, back towards Nelson's retreat. She hoped the mystery villain wasn't following her. She couldn't be sure, it was so dark. It was a miracle she didn't fall down the path. She didn't know what to do, go to the beach to check on Nelson Nutmeg, or go straight home to tell her dad. She decided it was best to go home. Her dad would know what to do. When Billie reached her caravan, she clattered open the door. She ran inside, eager to tell her dad what had happened. She was surprised to see him standing in the middle of the kitchen area, arms folded and with a stern look on his face. It was as if he was expecting her. "Dad, you're not going to believe what's happened," said Billie. He didn't say anything. He just raised an eyebrow, but in a way that indicated Billie was in trouble. He gestured for her to sit down. Billie was still buzzing with nervous energy, but she followed him into the caravan's living room and plonked herself down on the floor. Her dad started to pace back and forth in front of her. She decided to tell him everything. It was better to tell him the truth. Adults liked it when you told them the truth. She told him everything that had happened on the cliff and that someone had killed Nelson Nutmeg. "This is serious," said her dad. "I know, we have to tell someone," said Billie, pleased that her father was treating her like an adult for once. "I mean about sneaking off when you should have been in bed." Oh, apparently he wasn't taking her seriously after all. Billie tried to explain. "I wasn't sneaking, I was—" "What? What were you doing?" Billie's dad was very cross. She suddenly realised everything she was about to say was going to sound stupid. "Well, I was at the disco, sneaking off." He was in no mood to hear any more of Billie's story. "But I saw someone pushing Nelson off the cliff." "Don't be so childish. Get to bed now, Wilhelmina." Billie was only called Wilhelmina when she was in real trouble, like now. "But she pleaded. "I said now." Billie knew that was the end of the matter. There was no way to convince her dad about Nelson Nutmeg now. She wanted to make a dramatic exit, but the caravan wasn't all that big, so she just huffed and went to her thin little bed in the tiny bedroom she shared with Swindon. Billie flopped onto her bed, completely fed up. A light suddenly shone in her face. "Been on the old sneakeroo," said Swindon. Billie winced at her brother, who was wearing a torch on his head. "I thought older brothers were supposed to be cool," she said. "It's uncool not to have one of these," Swindon replied, pointing at his head torch. He loved gadgets. Billie folded her arms. She was in no mood for Swindon and his stupid nonsense. It was bad enough that they still had to share a room. "What do you want?" she asked. "Tell me about Nelson." "You'll only believe me if I say a UFO came and took him away." Swindon perked up at the mention of possible alien activity. "You saw a UFO?" "No, I saw Nelson get pushed off a cliff." Swindon was doubtful of the whole story. "Ha! You see a 6-foot squirrel get pushed off a cliff, and I'm the crazy one? You kids and your imaginations." "I'm not a kid," said Billie. If there was one thing she couldn't stand, it was people treating her like a child, especially Swindon, who she felt was more of a child than she was, even though he was older. "Hey, don't be in such a hurry to grow up. It's not easy being an adult, you know," said Swindon. "How would you know? You're only 16 and spend most of your time on the internet." Swindon was visibly upset by Billie's remark. He took off his head torch a bit bashfully, but then decided to tease his little sister so as not to let her think she had upset him. He put the torch in his sock and waved it around in front of Billie's face. "Woo, Billie, it's the ghost of Nelson Nutmeg." Billie immediately grabbed the sock and threw it on the floor. "Grow up," she said, but instantly felt bad. She hadn't meant to throw it away so hard and hoped the torch wasn't broken. She could see Swindon was upset, but she couldn't quite bring herself to apologise. At least, not right now. She'd do it in the morning. She needed to try to get some sleep. Try to put Nelson Nutmeg out of her head for a while. Chapter 6. Late Night Bonfire. It was the middle of the night. Billie couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, extremely restless. She couldn't get the dramatic events out of her head. The mystery villain arguing with Nelson Nutmeg, and then Nelson falling off the cliff. Billie tried to put it all out of her mind. Finally, she started to doze, but then she heard a noise outside, and a red glow started to flicker in through her window. Billie sat up and looked over at Swindon. He was snoring peacefully, all snuggled up in his silly sci-fi duvet. He'd probably slept through an alien invasion, she thought. She turned her attention to the window to find out what was going on outside. Billie lifted the curtains. She could just make out the beginning of the cliff path ahead, and a little further up someone had lit a bonfire. The flames crackled and reached into the night sky. Billie couldn't see much more in the gloom, apart from the bonfire, but then she noticed a silhouetted figure step up to the flames. Whoever it was had something in their hand. It was the costume head of Nelson Nutmeg. The figure moved forward, and then, with a dramatic pose, they threw the head into the bonfire. Billie realised this was vital evidence about Nelson Nutmeg's murder. She reached over to her mobile phone on her bedside and started filming. Now everyone would have to believe her, even her dad. She zoomed into the unknown person and the bonfire as close as she could. Maybe she'd get lucky and discover the identity of the killer, if it was indeed the killer. But who else could it be? It had to be them. Billie continued filming as the person slowly walked away from the bonfire. There wasn't much she could do now. She'd have to wait until morning to show her friends her evidence. This was exciting, and a bit scary, but mostly exciting. Billie couldn't get any sleep now. She couldn't wait to go to the secret den to tell Shiv, Woody and the Colonel everything about Nelson Nutmeg and the mysterious person by the bonfire.
You've been listening to Who Killed Nelson Nutmeg. It was read by Danny Stack from his own novelisation of the film. To find out more and watch some clips from the movie, visit nelsonnutmeg.com.